comfort and things like that, and security, was Sting in 1991, even though we had that Beach Blast match in 92, and The Undertaker in 1996. Sting kind of put me on the map, and then The Undertaker made sure that I stayed there. You know, those were the most important matches of my career. And I really enjoyed wrestling Sting again at the Lockdown match, and I think that was 2009. I did enjoy that.
Okay,
good guy, Stinger. Good guy.
Here, go ahead.
Yeah, mate, one of the most unanswered things in wrestling is the Montreal Screwjob. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
The Montreal Screwjob, Bob. I felt so strongly about the Montreal Screwjob finish, some of you might know this is true, that I quit the company for one day. At which point I looked at my contract and saw that I essentially breached it and wouldn't be allowed to make a dime anywhere in the world, including right here in Manchester, England, for the next 5 years. So I crawled back, begged for forgiveness. But even all these years later, Brett still appreciates that I was the guy who didn't show up for work. There were other guys who were claiming they weren't coming to work. And then that next night, I watched Raw from my hotel room, and they all were there. I was like, ooh, kind of hard to form a
Do you feel like naming and shaming me?
No shaming and shaming. No, none of that going on. Because my thing was kind of foolish. I mean, I did come to see that Vince was doing what he thought he had to do to survive. You know, I mean, they were locked in a struggle. You know, at that point, WWE was losing that race to WCW, and they were about to lose their most valuable entity. And so it was a really difficult time. But, I mean, they came out of it as friends, kind of 10 years later, 13 years later. And it gave birth to the character of Mr. McMahon. And that was one of the things that got the ball rolling. And then once we put Stone Cold into the mix, and he took on his boss, Mr. McMahon, things really took off. I was apparently the only guy that didn't know there was a difference between Vince McMahon and Mr. McMahon. So when I took issue with Vince having been blown up and killed on TV, Vince said, "Vince didn't die, Mick. Mr. McMahon did."
So you learn in life and in wrestling, as Mr. Miyagi once said, you stay on that one side of the road, you're fine. Stay on the other side of the road, you're fine. What happens to you if you veer into the middle? Squish, just like grape. You people have never seen The Karate Kid? What am I talking a foreign language here? The crane technique? No? I'll tell you something about the crane technique. This is what you learn about suspending disbelief in professional wrestling. This was supposed to be indefensible and correctly used, right? Last time I saw that used effectively was when Ian Anderson did a flute solo on the 1980 Jethro Tull tour. Got me thinking about the Karate Kid. I asked a couple people in wrestling if the Karate Kid was still relevant. They said, "Oh no, that was so long ago." I said, "All right, answer me this. Have you ever gone into the ring and done the crane technique?" And they said, "Yeah." Of course it's still relevant, right? The most touching scene in the movie by far, was when Daniel was under the impression he was being used by Mr. Miyagi simply to do some household chores around Mr. Miyagi's compound. Later came to find that he was actually secretly learning the techniques to make him a master of the art of karate. And that music kicked in and it was so touching. I realized how lucky Daniel was that Mr. Miyagi had a bunch of odd jobs he needed done around his compound. I realized how unfortunate he may have been if he had been under Mr. Miyagi's employ of a different nature, like say Mr. Miyagi had been the proprietor of a somewhat seedy massage parlor. He came in and he said, hey Mr. Miyagi, this is bullshit, man. Been jerking people up for 6 weeks. I haven't learned nothing. Miyagi says, Daniel-san, everything not as it seems. Show me work. with this dinosaur. The eyes. Work a shaft. Big stroke. Left hand. Right hand. Left hand. Now show me. Spread the ass. No, dinosaur. Spread ass. Big wide. Spread ass right. Spread ass left. There, now we know secrets of karate, Daniel-san. Now, Daniel-san, show me, fling the load. Big, strong Daniel, fling the left, fling the right. I don't even know if I got my left and right hands correct. I'm calling to live life to the extremes. Sometimes extremely well, sometimes not so well. In 1996, I had the good fortune to ride and room with one of the true legends of the wrestling business, a man named Jake the Snake Roberts. You guys remember Jake? Man, Jake had been down a tough road, and he found God. And for a while, for a few months period, I felt so fortunate to be around this holy man. We had an unfortunate occurrence where a guy we knew well, a guy to whom life had not been that kind, had a traumatic situation take place. He lived in a little trailer in the woods of Georgia. And this one night it was so hot that one of his children had to be taken to the hospital. And he wanted to know if we could buy him an air conditioner. It's $450. 1996. Now, some of you may be familiar with the legendary stories of my thriftiness on the road in professional wrestling. Anyone? Not entirely undeserved. Just ask my children. And it was a tough decision to make. On one hand, I knew it would help this family enormously. On the other hand, it was 96. I was just getting my break in WWE. The injuries, the years on the road had added up, despite what Dan Barry said, using the F word. You came up here and you said wrestling was fake? I have one fucking ear! Come on, Dad! God darn you! I don't mean to drop the F-bomb! The nurse in my room in Germany actually said that after she threw my ear out in the garbage can. She said, "Es ist Schauspiel, yeah," which means it's all fake. I was like, if there's one time you get the benefit of the doubt, shouldn't it be then? It was that thing where you step on the pedal and the lid goes up, and she threw out my ear as I struggled for the German word for formaldehyde. I wanted to put it in a jar and bring it home. That thing would be worth a fortune on eBay right now. Put the Georgie the Ghost book to shame. Anyway, I brought this situation up to Jake the Snake Roberts. I said, "Jake, what should I do?" And he looked at me. And he said one simple word. He said, "Pray." And I thought to myself, by saying one word, this man has shown himself to be the wisest man in the world. The next day he came to me and he said, "So, Mick, what did you decide to do?" And I said, we bought the air conditioner. And just when I thought Jake the Snake could not get any wiser, he did. He put his hand on my knee. He nodded his head. And he walked away, showing he was not only the wisest man in the world, but the most compassionate too. A couple days later in Canada, Jake surprised me a little bit by ordering a beer, because Jake had been sober for well over a year. His tough road through alcoholism, drug addiction was well documented. A woman came up and she said, "Mr. Roberts, should you really be doing that?" And Jake looked at her and he said, "Ma'am, the Lord has given me the strength to have just one beer." And I know the Lord doesn't give that strength to just anybody. That's a gift he bestows on few people. And now I knew he was not only the wisest man in the world, the most compassionate, but the strongest too. Later that night, around 4:30 a.m., the wisest, most compassionate, strongest man in the world urinated all over me. His urine was freezing cold. Like he had his own cross-brewed refrigeration system long before Coors Light got the patent on it. I woke up with a start with his freezing cold urine spraying all over me. I said, God damn it, Jake, what the hell are you doing? And his words no longer seemed that wise when he went, and he collapsed in bed. I was pissed, man. I went down. I wanted to switch rooms immediately, but it was only 4:30 a.m. I knew I'd have to pay for an extra night. So I watched Kung Fu reruns until 6. I went up to the lady and I said, I know I specifically asked for a non-smoking, non-urine room. The next day, Jake came up to me. He said, I guess we need to talk. I said, you better believe we do. He said, I guess some forgiveness is in order. I said, you better believe it is. Because I was willing to do that for him. Then he said to me, you know you took the Lord's name in vain last night. And then, sickest, most disgusting of all, the people in attendance, and there were actually thousands, saw a startling metamorphosis. Before their very eyes, a man who had walked into the ring as a hardcore legend turned into Kate Winslet at the end of the Titanic. As Leo DiCaprio drifts tragically, but quite handsomely, to the bottom of the North Atlantic. I just said, come back. Come back. Booker, let's have some questions, man.
Okay, we've got time for a couple of questions, so before you put the hands up, really seriously think about this, because what was the question you got? You get a lot, Mick?
Did it hurt when The Undertaker threw you off the cell?
Stallone asked you that.
Yeah, Stallone asked me that.
Alright, so take a moment.
Of course it hurts, you dumb
dick. What's your name, sir?
Steve.
Steve, do you think this question's worthy?
I hope so.
I want more confidence in that. Anyway, what's your question for me?
Well, one of my favourite things I've ever seen you do is your impression of Terry Funk, because it's just spot on. Have you got any funny stories of Terry Funk you could tell us?
I have no stories for you, sir. In fact, I'm going to tell you a particularly sad story about Terry Funk. 1995, at a show called the Kawasaki Dream, now known as the King of the Deathmatch Tournament. Cactus Jack and I walked into the outfield so we could see what type of C4 explosives they were going to set off. They set off the explosives and that wussy Cactus Jack said, No! No, I'm not doing that! How can we possibly do that and not get killed? And I said, I think it looks good, but how about we put another one right in the middle there?